Yeah, I was kind of hanging out there
have a
for a
question
year.
about that.
Anything further in terms of late items for the agenda or modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call for approval of the agenda, please. Can I have a mover?
Yeah, you
Michael,
can.
secondary, Joyce,
Yep.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Assume everybody's agreed. Thank you. The minutes are the next point. Is adoption of minutes. Minutes of the Financial Advisory Committee meeting held November 10th, 2020. And we're going to be calling for a recommendation that the minutes of that meeting be adopted. Any comments before we proceed? Joyce?
No, I was going to move adoption. They looked okay.
Yeah.
Secondary, Michael. Any other comments or questions? And this is major capital project updates. And Liam, I understand you were going to provide a verbal update.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, I've been having trouble with my headset today, so I seem to figure that out. Yeah, so we have a number of capital initiatives on the go. The fire hall project, I'll start there. You've probably seen, and if you haven't, along Miller Road, they've got the site fencing up, securing the area. There were a bunch of people on site last week wearing hard hats and a bit of a paparazzi moment.
Sure.
there was a groundbreaking ceremony where council members and some of the committee members and the construction crew were there. So that project is advancing after many years in the development phase. So they should be able to turn the taps on, and everybody in Kobe would be receiving very high quality water that'll go through an ultra filtration unit, a ceramic filter, before UV disinfection and chlorination. And that is I think an exemplary project of where we want to be moving with our drinking water systems. And so that's a pretty exciting project. Not all of our systems are going to require ultrafiltration anytime soon, but it is a bit of a showcase project for us on the drinking water side of things. There are a number of culvert replacement projects scheduled for the year, and really those projects cannot take place until the creeks dry up later in summer, and we have a short window of opportunity during the fisheries window where we're allowed to get in, do works in and about a stream. And we also have a number of road improvement projects that'll be happening for the summer. Not large main roads, more arterial side roads that we're going to be working on. And then we also are still advancing the large community center municipal hall project, and that is nearing the tender process. So we're in the final stages of finalizing the tender documents, which would then go out to the public later this spring, early summer, and ideally looking to secure a vendor for that project to commence in the fall. We also are in the process of trying to secure funding for a on-island composting facility project, which would be placed in the bird recycling site. And so we have a number of other capital project applications in the hopper as well, including more funding for the other stages of the multi-use path. But I think I'll leave it at that. Those are the primary capital initiatives underway. Any questions about any of those?
Anybody questions for Liam?
Liam,
Michael, and then Allison?
sorry, Liam, just one thing. With the commissioning of this big project around about April, which, by the way, is exactly online for going back from the beginning, it always was going to be April. So I compliment the people who although that year, well over a couple of years, got that right. Here we are, April, and it's happening. Cove Bay water was in such a poor state. Many of the people in Cove Bay have got fairly intricate filtration systems leading into their homes. Could you ask the engineers if we need to bypass those or stop them getting clogged up? Because when you terminate something and then you reintroduce a new supply, you just cannot help but disturb a lot of stuff. So Liam, would they be kind enough that if we need to bypass fairly elaborate filtration units around our homes, we could get a bit of notice so we don't end up with them absolutely just cluttered up with silt and what have you? It would just be a courtesy for those good folk, including myself. So maybe not all good folk.
Right. That's a really good point. I'll touch base with Patrick about that. The idea with this is that this project is going to reduce any sedimentation or organics in our lines rather than introduce, and we're not replacing any lines. So, but you are right. It is often that when you muck around with any some pipes, something gets disrupted, and so I'll touch base with Patrick on it. I think it's a very low risk, but it's worth flagging.
Can I just add a sort of an add-on to that particular point? Because again, many of us have fairly sophisticated systems with all sorts of things, and I guess the question is, for the average homeowner may not be aware of what the level of purity in terms of the water that's going to be coming through the plant, and what additional things will still be required by homeowners. Because most of us move to these systems because it was appropriate because of water quality issues. And I think it just raised a question of what can be expected, and if the same level of sophisticated system operation on each of our homes is going to be necessary going forward, or
right.
maybe more optional.
It's worth, that's a really good point. And I'll talk with both Patrick and Sophie about it, getting a communication. Ultrafiltration, is one step above reverse osmosis. And so unless you have a reverse osmosis system, this will be equivalent, if not better than anything you have in your home. And I bet most people don't have reverse osmosis. So ultimately, you could walk away from your home-based system. Now, I do want to just to be clear, there still are some fairly old pipes from where the new treatment plant are to your home. So the pipes themselves can sometimes be a source of issues. So it may be worth.
Yeah, it's just something for consideration. I think, Allison, you had your hand up before.
Well, I would just add to Michael, a comment to Michael's comment. We have a filtration system put in our house, and I didn't have it put in because of the quality of the water, because I was drinking the water quite nicely beforehand. I had it put in so it would take the chlorine out of the water, and we're still going to have chlorine in the water with this new system because it has to be in there for the pipes for Vancouver Coastal Health.
Yeah, and so yeah. I do the same thing, but I just use a Brita in my fridge.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Well, well, I didn't like the smell of it in the shower either. The other comment was, my question had to do with the mop. It looked today when we drove down there that it was actually, they quit and gone away because it was like 3 o'clock and 3:30 and there wasn't anybody working. So when do they bring the retaining wall stack rock in?
I don't know.
Because that dirt bank's got to have something in front of it.
I know that it's going to be hydroseeded, but I'm not sure.
So there's no retaining wall? Oh, okay. Because I had a look at the drawings and I thought I could see a retaining wall.
I don't know the details of.
Okay.
All
right.
Of that.
Okay, it's just the questions I keep getting asked that I can't answer. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Rob, I think you had your hand up too.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Just Liam, I do think it's great, like the project at the water plant. It's a good news story, and that's how we want to move forward with projects. So, it coming online in April, I hope we can sort of have a bit of a celebration as well and sort of showcase how we can move projects like this in the future forward. So just a comment about that, because April's coming up pretty soon. Not to get too into the weeds, but on the culverts, how much can you give us an idea of what's happening this year? I know last year it was like, I think around $500,000 or something like that, or a bit over that. What are we looking at this year, and are there any big ones?
It's a similar, it's lower than what was scheduled for last year. Last year that we had a couple of really big projects. And as you might recall, one of them didn't get completed because they ran into some challenges, and then the fish window closed. And
Yeah.
so they'll be back to finish the work on it's the Miller Road one where it crosses, that's not Terminal Creek there, is it?
I forgot what creek it is there.
The primary creek which goes into Mannion Bay. I can't remember.
Yeah, where they
the
had
name of it
problems
at that
adhering
spot.
to the walls of that.
That's Terminal Creek.
Yeah. So they'll be back to finish that work on that one. And then the other culverts are smaller in size and in complexity than that one. The
Joyce, I think- sorry.
culvert, just a quick note. Basically, we'll be doing culvert replacement work forever.
Yeah.
Because we have close to 400 primary culverts. And so it's just like the ideal asset management schedule is that you're not, like if you have many roofs on your property, you don't want to have to replace them all in the same year.
Yeah,
And
And I guess the reason why I asked is because I see that as an ongoing cost that we're just going to have to deal with. I'm just curious how much roughly over the next 10 years is it going to be about $500,000 a budget cycle, or do we have to up that, or is that roughly where we want to be at?
No, I think it'll drop. So, and we'll have, and we don't have a solid asset management plan in place. We want to do culverts as our first one, first asset class to get that solidified. But what we would likely see is that we will have these blips every probably 5 to 10 years where we have more expensive culvert replacements that approach the $500,000 plus range.
Okay.
But then on an ongoing annual basis, it's more like between 200,000 and 400,000 for just smaller culvert replacements. And so it'll be an annual budget item, but generally hovering more around the $200,000 to $400,000 range with these blips that come up periodically for
The big ones. Okay, thanks.
Joyce, I think you had your hand up too.
Joyce, you're muted.
Hello?
Sorry, thanks.
It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
We all take turns.
It's kind of like going for a drink of coffee with your mask on, right?
Yeah, yes.
I tried that the other day.
My question is in relationship to the community center. I noticed that there's a borrowing. It's the excerpt for the minutes of October 20th, 2020, where the council approved borrowing from the Municipal Finance Authority of $4 million plus for the community center. And it's just related to the language. And, we've had extensive discussions at FAC about not going into full-term borrowing until we have the project finished, that we're going through construction costs. I'd like confirmation that that's the route that we're going. And the question that I have is, what language, where is it that covers that off?
Yeah, go ahead, Raj.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that resolution was an older resolution, which I believe was, I don't think it was rescinded. That's a security issuing resolution. And the intent was to go to I guess, to the MFA for the full borrowing. However, we did change direction, and we're going in the direction that you have suggested, Joyce, and that is temporary borrowing. And there is a resolution that's come after that that council has approved for temporary borrowing. So we'll be drawing down funds as they're required. And then once the project is complete, we'll convert that into a long-term borrowing.
Okay, so great. I'm thrilled with that. Thank you. Maybe it could be an attachment to our minutes for this meeting, please, so that we have it like.
Sorry, was that the last council meeting, Raj?
No,
No,
I believe
No.
I believe it was in a January or early February council meeting. It's a report from Hope.
So
Okay, sorry, that's not here. I will do that, yes, Joyce.
thank you. Okay,
Okay,
excellent. Glad to hear it.
Sorry,
Okay,
just to be
any
clear, I'm
other
looking for a
questions?
resolution about long-term borrowing. Is that it?
no, it's interim construction financing
was-
until the project's built.
Yeah.
We only draw down on the borrowing as we need it. And I did ask that question at that time, Joyce, who got, yeah, because I wasn't going to go for taking it all out in day one.
okay. Any other questions for Liam? I have one, Liam, on this one. It relates to the multipath. I mean, in reading the local paper these days, it highlighted in a couple of weeks ago or the last week or two that we're looking at the potential of 3 phases. I mean, this is obviously quite different than what we chatted about when it went by the FAC the first time. And I guess the budget's now at 885 for the current phase, with 390,000 coming from the municipality, which is, I think, an increase of around 158,000 over what we'd addressed earlier. I know you did address it in your report and 5-year plan approval, I think, to council. But I guess my question is, one of the things, as the additional phases will be dependent on grants and things like that, where do we sit in terms of part of the 5-year plan was that new asset acquisitions should be limited to 375,000 from reserves annually? Are we at a point where we're outside of that objective that was established?
I don't think
Or
so,
could we?
because the actual, and Raj, you might have to help me out here, but what we secured through the tender process was quite a bit lower than what we had budgeted for. And that may not have been reported out. I do believe we talked about it with council, but the budget was for, I think, 880 for the first phase. But we secured a contract for closer to 600. And so we've actually got, I can't remember the exact numbers, but over $200,000 savings in that line item. And then the other component of the multi-use path that so if we call the section from Carter Road to, Mount Gardner Road to Carter Road, that's what's being worked on right now. If we call that phase 1, the next phase of it is from effectively Cardina Road by the library all the way up just past Seniors Road to where the new rental building is being built. But we're partnering with the owners of the rental building to reconstruct the path there. And that, if we're successful in that funding application, it's 100% funding.
Okay.
And so,
There's a
I'm
third
just
phase
more
later.
curious about that we were within the guidelines that we'd established,
yeah.
that
And the third
we haven't
phase,
shifted outside that.
and the third phase would be 80% funding if we're successful from Carter Road to Artisan Square,
That's right.
a short little bit. And so I think we should be within that.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. Anything else on updates? We'll move on to new business. Point 8.1 is terms of reference for the Finance Advisory Committee. It had come up at a previous meeting that we should periodically review our terms of reference to make sure that we're satisfied with those items. And also the fact that, excuse me, just in the background here, I can't shut it off. It's the landline. Anyway, they'll go away in a few minutes. But anyway, and I think we'd identified that there may be some potential or consideration being given to if there's any revisions or proposed revisions to the terms of reference for the committee. And so it provides an opportunity to do that. And I guess my comment is too, concurrently, I know that, Michael, you're involved with a committee review as well. So it's kind of a timely point for that process. And I guess the question is, in putting it forward on the table, you always had a chance to review the terms of reference. Are there any points that you would like to see addressed or considered for revision within those terms of reference? And we can do that basically at this point in time. Any comments or with regards to the terms of reference?
I didn't realize what you were wanting, Fred. So you
yeah,
just said
'cause we did
review. So I thought
yeah.
we were actually going to review them at the meeting, or you had some suggestions about things you want to change. So
Well, I have a couple suggestions.
I haven't looked at them on that basis.
Well, okay, I guess what we could do then is bring it back to the next meeting, knowing that I would like input from members of the committee as it relates to the content of the terms of reference, and we can bring it.
That's fine with me, but I'd like to make a suggestion, and that is, it would help the discussion, I think, if we each were to share our thoughts with one another prior to the meeting.
Submitted within the time frame, then she could send it out as one email or in one
document. Yeah,
one document,
great.
rather than sort of back and forth. I don't want this to be a major work effort. So I think just accumulate the individual comments and provide one email. Let's establish a time. How about April 15th, just for the sake of the time?
Okay.
Sounds fine.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. So I
So
think
I still had a question, Fred,
please go ahead, Allison.
which has now just gone right out of my head. Oh, I know. It's to do, Michael, your review that you and Maureen are doing.
Yeah.
When is it due to finish?
Probably not until we're probably will be ready with a draft report. We estimated about the time that council broke for the summer recess.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that if we had input into the terms of reference and stuff, then it gets in, we can input that into your committee report, because one of the things you were going to maybe outcome would be suggested terms of reference changes, right?
Well, we would probably come up with saying that terms of references should be reviewed rather than be specific and directive, because that is not our aim. If it is generally felt by the chairs that we need to do this on an appropriate basis, let's do it. But we will not try to write individual terms of reference.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other points or questions? No, moving on. 8.2, everybody was provided with a meeting schedule proposed for 2021. Any additional comments or questions relative to what's been proposed?
Steph, what time were they at, those meetings?
I think we generally have them at 4:30.
Yeah, okay.
Can somebody just read off the dates? I think they were okay, but
I can do do you want me to do a share screen?
yeah, that
Sure.
would be good, because I'm
That would be
having
good.
trouble
Yeah,
with, I'm trying
thank
to, I don't want to lose the closed agenda that I found and put up on my
Sorry, I
other
just-
laptop.
Oops. Just a sec.
I think I was wondering about the audit one. Are they going to be ready?
Working towards being ready, yes. We worked backwards on the audit from the May 6th date.
Okay.
Can you see?
Not yet.
No,
Wow.
it's just going around in circles. Just read off the, yeah, so May the.
Okay,
6th
so
was
May,
the-
so the year-end operating results are moved to next meeting, which is May 6th, Thursday at 4:30. Projects update, year-end operating results, Q1 financial results, developer contributions and development cost charges, bylaw.
There you go.
There you
Good
go.
job.
There we go.
What I would recommend we do for the May 6th meeting, if you don't mind, is Q1. Usually there's not much to report, and given we're going to be going over year-end results, I would suggest we, for this year, take the Q1 financial results out and review at mid-year in July, review the mid-year results. Because we'll have a heavy agenda in May.
Okay, and I guess my other question was, the draft financial statements, the review of those, does that have to be enclosed? Certainly the BDO audit report should be, but I don't know if the review of the draft should be enclosed. Just
Yeah, the draft
thinking
can
about,
be in, okay.
yeah, well, I was just thinking about that one. Okay, and then I was going to make the same comment about the Q1 financials. Yeah.
Okay. So everybody has a chance now to look at this page. Any other? Sorry?
My only question was, when do we first start seeing audit?
Oh.
Is that in January, or I thought we saw it at the end of the, met with the auditor.
That's the pre-audit meeting.
Yeah, the pre-audit meeting.
Yeah, that's not in there. You're right.
We'll have to, that should be in the November
Okay.
Yeah.
time.
And we're also dealing with this specific area of the in the closed meeting right now in today's meeting, so that may change that particular point. Otherwise, are we okay with this?
Fred, if I may, September the 23rd happens to be the last day of the 3-day September meeting of the Island Trust trustees. So that the 23rd, September the 23rd, I see now they have their dates there, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. That would be an issue for me, that September date.
Is it a live in-person meeting, Michael, or a Zoom meeting?
It'll be a Zoom meeting.
So does it go till 4 o'clock?
You know something, it may not. And
They
if you want
usually
to
end-
put it,
yeah.
but if you want to put it provisional, Steph, can I leave it that I will research that and see if normally after 3 days of IT meetings, then to go to our own
Retired.
Yeah, we'll give you a
Oh,
chance
come on.
to be your escape card.
But
Ellison, you're ruthless.
yes, whatever, Steph, if I may, through the chair, I'll keep you posted on that one. Let's try not to just. You've got it set there. I'm inclined to see if we can do it just for the fun of another meeting after 3 days.
Well, does anyone off the top of their head know if they can make the 30th?
Let's leave it at that.
I think I would.
Come back
We have
later.
enough members, and I think
Yeah.
I suggest that we leave it as is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if Michael has, it's in a get a jail free card for him to come to our meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right, you are.
Okay, so we're okay then with the schedule, and we'll move on from that point. I haven't seen any other comments.
I have a comment, Fred.
Sorry, yes? John?
Now, for these items, for some of them, do we get packages ahead of time and some of them we don't? Is that the procedure?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
And-
You
And
always get the
the
packages
intent
ahead of time.
is that we should receive information that supports the agenda a week before our meeting. For those, I mean, some of them are simply verbal reports, but most of the major ones that are identified in that schedule going forward through the year will be in fact supported by written reports or schedules.
Okay, thank you.
And John, we can review some of these processes offline if you'd like.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I guess I might just throw in is I'm not sure that everything that we're supposed to be doing in our terms of reference is covered off in items on agendas. So we can discuss that maybe when we May 6th when we discuss the terms of reference.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll now move on to point 8.3, which is the excerpt from the October 26th regular council meeting, reading Turffield Reserve Fund. And this has been referred to our committee. And I'm not sure what exactly we're going to address. The council has directed staff to establish a reserve fund for the Turffield revenues and replacements based on an expanded or expected life of 10 to 12 years. So I guess the question is, there's an expectation that funds or a reserve will be established. I guess my question is, it simply a matter of whether it's a new fund or an existing fund or a subcategory of a fund? So I guess I'm not sure what exactly we're expected to do, because council has directed that a reserve fund be established.
So Allison, Julian, you were the counselor on that committee at the time. Are you able to?
We, when the turf field was installed, there was a resolution that we keep all the rental money knowing and put that aside so that when we had to replace the turf, we would have money put aside to do that. For some reason, that didn't happen.
Okay.
We, it doesn't, yeah. So whether it's just a pot of surplus or an actual statutory reserve, but that was the logic. And so when we were talking about it at the Recreation Commission, I recommended that we should formalize the process and put away the rental money every year to resurface the turf, have it there when we have to resurface the turf field, rather than it just sitting there offsetting general recreation program operations costs.
Rob?
So that was the logic. So we've got a comment,
Joyce?
section called reserves if coming up, if we wanted to put it under that discussion. But if we don't have a separate reserve for it, it's going to get lost in the shuffle.
Rob, then Joyce?
Well, I don't know why we're setting up a separate reserve fund for one piece of infrastructure. I mean, I think, why would we not ensure that the revenue goes into, let's say, a general reserve fund that we then draw from? Why are we setting specifically aside the money for replacement of a turf field? Who knows what's going to happen in 12 years from now, right? With where our priorities shift, recreational wise or not. I think if we are going to do that, it should be maybe in a recreational reserve, but to specifically have it for certain pieces of infrastructure, I think is going to get really messy across the board, because which areas of infrastructure are we going to set up separate reserves for? So maybe a bit more clarity on why this specific asset would have a separate reserve versus other assets. Like, what's the benefit? I just don't see it right now.
The users are providing the money for the replacement, but through the rent. And then we don't end up with somebody else saying, oh, look, there's 200,000 in a reserve fund. We can take it all for Y.
So
Which
we're
is
going
what's
to do that
happening
with
right now with the multi-use path.
Okay.
So
I think there's a question. Let's go to Raj to respond to that point, and then I'm going to go to Joyce, who has a question. Raj?
So I was going to share a little bit of historical information on that from what I was able to trace down. I did go in looking for basically what had happened here. So we do have an operating reserve that's titled the Synthetic Grass Field Reserve that exists, and it was established back in 2010. There were contributions made to that reserve in 2010 and 11 of 12,500 each, and then 20,000 was taken out of that reserve in 2014. I don't have the details in terms of which asset specifically those transactions went towards, but since 2014, that reserve has had about a $5,000 balance in it. I had asked our corporate officer to take a look into looking up the resolutions, if there were any resolutions regarding the establishment of that reserve, and she wasn't able to locate anything. And just from my perspective, I'm kind of going to reiterate what Rob had said, that I don't believe that a reserve specifically for the replacement of the turf field makes sense. There isn't a significant source of revenue to contribute that reserve. Essentially, right now, we charge about $8,000 a year to the football club for the use of the artificial turf and the grass field. And our maintenance costs for both the grass field and the artificial turf field exceed that $8,000.
Hmm.
So I believe that when we've been talking about replacements of assets, we are referring to the asset renewal and replacement reserve, and that should be the funding source. And if for optics, you want some revenues derived going to a reserve for the replacement of the turf field, then some of that $8,000 could go to the capital renewal and replacement reserve. I believe we should have a separate operating reserve put aside specifically for the synthetic grass field.
And can I just add a bit to what Raj was saying? So the manager of recreation and community services and myself have been in dialogue with the soccer club about the fees, and this was in dialogue. We've been in dialogue with them since the fall, because they have found the fee that we charge to be cost prohibitive to run their club. And so I've been really reluctant to reduce their fees because it barely covers the maintenance. And however, we have struck a deal to provide them with a discount for the last year because of COVID impacts. Basically the club was down to nothing. And so we felt that was a reasonable measure to support the club for 1 year reduction in their fees. They're looking for further reductions going forward, but I'm looking for increases. And so it's this interesting battle, and we don't have any other real revenue generation from that field other than that club. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
Joyce first, and then we'll go on to Allison and Raj.
I don't know if I'm going to add anything to this conversation, but I'll still give it a whirl. What this discussion should remind us all is be careful of the promises you make, because you're going to have to wear them at some point. And so I think that Raj's comments about optics are very real, because there were many people that were against that field to start with. And they finally were persuaded that they would go with it, in part because they felt that the revenue was going to cover the costs for replacement. And that was one of the issues that was being bandied about. So optics, I mean, I think we can do whatever we want, but we have to be honest with what the expectations were of the community when it comes to money. And so maybe it's a story that needs to be told. That's my concern, is being upfront with the community. I can't tell you how many people, different, not the same ones, asked me, is the money that was put aside from the revenue from those fields going to the new turf? You're on the finance committee, you're supposed to know. And so it's a live issue within the community. Doesn't have to be, that we're forced into a commitment that was made long ago, but we do have to acknowledge that that commitment was made.
Thank you, Joyce. Allison?
Well, I just wanted to add the motion. I don't think the motion that's there was actually passed by council. What that motion is a referral motion from the rec commission meeting to council. And we had somewhat of this discussion, and I think the motion was referred to the finance committee rather than actually passed at council. So just a clarification point on that. And the other is this whole thing about how we put money aside to replace things. I mean, there's other users for the that use the school field and use the artificial turf field besides the football club.
Such as,
Just the general community running around. Kids will play
Oh,
baseball,
right,
football,
right,
you
right.
know.
yeah,
The
yeah.
school uses them both all in their programming and, you know, so they're not the sole users, so they shouldn't necessarily be expected that their fees will cover off all the ongoing operations and maintenance.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Raj?
I was
Ron's
just,
got his
well,
hand
one of
up
the
too.
things I was going to say, Allison already said, my understanding of the, basically the referral to FAC was the same as Allison, so that's been covered. The other thing I was going to mention was since 2012, I believe,
Nothing with,
has not been a contribution to this reserve. So the monies that we have been collecting, or the revenue that we've been collecting, which is probably approximately $8,000 a year, has gone towards the maintenance costs. So if we were to pass a resolution, if we were to consider putting monies into a reserve specifically that are coming from revenue, then we are actually going to have to either make that increase up through a tax rate increase or through a reduction in cost. So essentially you'll be robbing from Paul to pay Peter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You decide you want to make a contribution to that reserve. It will require additional funding in one or reduction in expenditures. It'll be a cost pressure is what I'm trying to say to the organization to do that.
So
I have
that
a
kind
comment.
of,
Don has,
who's that?
Fred, I have a question about, or a comment about the reserve. I guess the question was, does the soccer club receive any grants from the municipality?
oh,
Because in
they have
theory,
done
if
from the
they're-
community grants advisory committee has recommended to council in the past.
have they gotten some in the past?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I know it'd be, rather than robbing Peter or Paul, we'd be taking from Jane, but in theory, they could be given a community grant that then enables them to make a contribution to the reserve.
Can I just speak in lack of rec staff being here, just from being on that committee? I think the recommendation was made was because the manager of rec kept coming back to the committee with updates about the turf field. And the committee was getting a little fatigued by how long the process was taking and how many hoops she had to jump through and different, just about whether it's going to be coconut or plastic and going to council and going to staff and fighting with the football club and what the cost was going to be. And we finally said if there was just a reserve, then staff wouldn't have to go through all that drama, basically.
Rob?
Where that recommendation came from.
Thank you. Rob?
Steph, what decision do we have to make tonight? Because it doesn't sound like like this is going anywhere. So do we have to say anything?
Council's
or-
asking for your advice on what they should do with that recommendations. Basically, do you think that the reserve is a good idea or not?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
So that sounds. what
But
I'm
we're
hearing
gonna
from
have a
everybody.
whole philosophical discussion about reserves, are we not, in a meeting
No.
or two down from now?
Oh, no.
Because
This was
in
gonna
which
take-
case I think we should just defer it to that discussion.
Yeah, let's.
I feel like you guys are pretty clear, though.
Can you
Yes,
read something out, Steph?
I've only
Yeah,
heard,
something.
I guess,
Sorry,
Allison has been quite clear about her position, and I've sensed from other people that they may have a different position.
Okay.
Is it worth, at this point, at least considering a motion if somebody wants to put one forward, and then we can either address it and make that decision?
Oh.
Sorry, Rob?
Yeah, Steph, maybe you can help me with something, but basically that Finance Advisory Committee at this time does not recommend setting up a separate reserve or statutory reserve for the turf field.
Separate statutory.
And maybe we could add as a sort of a whereas, as the committee is going to be addressing reserves in the future and I'm not sure the right
Good.
terminology, structure of the reserve
Yeah.
processes,
Thanks.
that would be included within those topics or considered
Good.
as part of that process.
Yeah, great addition.
So
Do you wanna
reserve
say-
fund in general.
Oh, do
Sorry.
you want to say statutory reserve? Because I don't think council was, I don't think the request called
Yeah.
for a stat.
What should it be, Raj?
It should just be reserved. Just
Yeah.
remove the word statutory.
Get rid of statutory. Yeah, that's good.
Did I hear there was reserve already in place?
For the Turffield?
Yeah, it's an operating reserve that's in place.
It's a squirreled away reserve of surplus.
So is it for operating or is it for replacement?
Sorry,
Or is it just for squirrels?
you either have statutory reserves or the other reserves are all referred to as operating reserves. And so if it's not a statutory reserve, it's an operating reserve.
And it doesn't necessarily get used for operating. It can be used
Yeah.
for
It can be used
capital
for,
replacement.
It's just sits in
Thanks,
general
Sam.
surplus and gets lost.
Statutory reserves are harder to raid than operating.
They're set up by bylaw as well, so you have to, and they have specific uses in the bylaw.
and operating reserves actually don't get lost. They get tracked separately from general surplus. So they are part of surplus, but they're tracked separately from what is in accumulated surplus. So they are tracked and kept.
But I didn't see
Yeah,
that
you're right.
$5,000 on the operating reserve statement the last time we got one, which I think was quite a while ago.
Yeah. And I guess
Raj, you froze.
I think going forward, as part of we'll need to look at materiality. We'll need to look at a number
We
of
don't
other
report
things
them out on
rates, and the fact that we have to say Raj doesn't lose things. But I think.
I'm not saying I don't lose things, but
Okay, well, but I think at least it allows us to bring it forward that at the moment seems to be the general consensus, and can vote determine whether that's the case or not. That it will be addressed as part of the consideration regarding reserves in our review going forward. And,
I'll move that.
Are you okay, Steph, with that?
Yeah, I've just got, whereas the committee will be considering the municipality reserve funding process in general in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's slated for one of our meetings coming up.
Okay, I'll do the date then.
Okay, do I have a
Can
second
Steph
for
read
that?
what it is we're being asked to vote on?
And I'll probably tweak it offline. We'll be considering reserve funding process at the blah blah meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that the committee does not recommend that a separate statutory reserve fund for the turf.
Not statutory, it's an operating reserve, right?
you
Just
don't even need
reserve
to
is
put
what Raj
operating in
wanted.
it.
Just reserve.
Just the word reserve.
Reserve.
Reserve
The
fund.
committee does not recommend that a separate reserve fund for the Turffield be established at this time.
Thanks, Steph.
Joyce? I can't hear you.
I second it.
Seconded by Joyce.
Good.
Any other comments or questions before we vote?
I will vote for it because it has the words "at this time" in it, but it's coming back when we have the reserve discussion.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, I can't see John. You okay?
Aye.
And,
Okay.
All
oh,
in favor? Thank you. The
I
next
think we're
thing,
getting our 2 new items now, Fred.
I think so.
The COVID restart.
Yeah, okay, maybe do that one and then we'll do the other election last. My only comment was, I was referring to informational attachment that talks about the COVID, what's it called here? Anyway, sorry, here it goes. COVID-19 restart or safe restart of local government grant, the one that's been received for 1.2 million 273. My suggestion is that, and my recommendation, even as a motion, is that be referred to the FAC as to work with management to develop the strategic plans around how those grant funds or proceeds are addressed, and that this committee become involved in that process. My intent is kind of to take it out of the political realm and bring it into a committee that will be able to work with management to follow through on how those proceeds. I think the fact is that it's substantial dollars, and I think that's kind of where this committee gets involved in matters. So that was kind of what I was proposing in terms of comment. So if I'd be happy to entertain any questions or thoughts on that or other views.
Fred, if I may, just because I need, and I may have to just enlist Liam's help here with this fund. I know that we, if you like, when I say parked it, we have put it in one side, but to protect it as whole, and to keep it available for whatever we may or may not decide, rather than let it be dispersed and almost frittered away immediately on this cause and the other. Am I right in thinking that we don't have any definite predetermined course for these funds at the moment?
Yeah, Michael, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. And so,
please do, please.
It's been our intention to bring forward a strategy to the committee and to council for use of the funds.
Mhm.
And we have talked in the past with council about exactly what Michael just described, about we're holding the funds as effectively as a reserve to provide us with security in the absence of knowing how this pandemic will continue to unfold. And now that it feels like we're getting closer to having a firm handle on the pandemic, and that we've got a rigorous vaccination schedule rolling out, that we're going to have more certainty and clarity around that, and so then we can start to consider appropriate uses of that fund. I have been discussing internally with staff an approach whereby we would secure a percentage, let's say, perhaps it's 80% of the allocation, and preserve that until we have certainty on getting clear of this pandemic, and the other remaining 20% to be used for existing operating pressures that we've already felt directly related to the pandemic. So we have a number of expenses that we've incurred around personal protective equipment, some improvements to municipal staff working spaces and working places, as well as there are some pressures that we're feeling that access to those additional funds would be helpful. So that's the extent of our discussions that we've had at council and then internally with staff about the funds to date. Allison, or over to you.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No
Sorry.
problem.
Fred,
Allison?
Yeah. So just to clarify a couple of things, did we actually get the money before December 31st? Okay, so it's in our December 31st financial statement. We're now almost at the end of March and we haven't seen the draft year-end financials. So did we end up with an operating surplus without that grant and the, from operations and the money we spent on things?
We're working on the financials right now. We will, I feel we will be in an operating surplus position because we had a number of contributed assets that we'll be taking into consideration as well, which contribute to that.
Well, but by contributed assets, you mean subdivisions coming in?
Subdivision, yeah, basically.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about general operations, not, subdivisions coming in show up as income, but they end up in capital assets.
Yeah,
So
we're analyzing, we're doing that review right now, Allison.
Okay, because I think some people have made the point that that money can be used to repay us for money we spent to get the offices up for COVID. And I think that's what Liam was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that we don't have a deficit or we end up in an operating surplus, but,
Okay. So
and are we going to contribute that to just a reserve of surplus and then sort of account for it, what we spend it on separately? Is that the intention?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
so one of the other, I'm sorry, Fred.
No, go ahead.
So one of the other reasons why I've been really advocating for holding the funds until we have greater certainty. Well, first and foremost is that if the pandemic were to take a turn for the worse and we found ourselves in a very desperate situation, then it would be welcome additional revenue that we could use to offset whatever expenditures might be needed. Additionally, we have the community center and new municipal hall project. We have not yet secured a vendor. We haven't gone to tender yet, so we don't know what the total cost will be. But part of the redesign work that we did was informed by the pandemic to ensure that the municipal hall and community spaces were adequately designed to be pandemic proof. And we took into consideration things like the new work environment where some staff will potentially continue to work from home, or we may have that flexibility. But that redesign work has resulted in some additional costs. We don't know exactly what that will look like until we get the market feedback. And so it's an eligible category for use of those funds for a project like that. And so that's one of the categories, or one of the future spends that I could anticipate using those funds towards. Another reason why I wish to hold on to them.
And I think it's a good idea that you do hold on to them. I just come back to the point that I think that in involving the FAC in that process regarding the plans around the use of the funds, and as council made some reference to sort of a strategic overview in terms of how those funds will be utilized over time, that it just will help to assist with formalizing that process, and also, as I said, allowing it to sort of, it's part of the way of keeping it safe to the side, so to speak, over the period of time. And we can assist with that process, and also assist by making recommendation at appropriate time in the future for use of the funds when that comes up. So that's what I'm proposing. I don't think it requires a motion. I think just we as the committee have not really talked about it or even brought it up at all. But I think it should be noted that would be what we would consider to be the preferred course going forward as it relates to those grant funds. Is everybody okay with that? I mean, I don't think we need a motion on that, but I just think that it needs to be put out there that we're here to assist with that process and to assist management in that process.
Yeah.
Rob?
And Fred and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe this is something that also needs to be included in with your discussions around committee roles and responsibilities and whatnot, that committee work you're doing as well right now.
John O'Donnell has a question. Will there be another grant, you think, coming next year? And if we haven't spent this year's, would it compromise getting another one?
No, it wouldn't compromise it. There's no requirement to spend the funds within any specified amount of time. And the likelihood of another grant like this is low. I was part of designing the program before I left the province. I was pleasantly surprised that it was larger than it was anticipated to be. But I think the likelihood of another one is really low.
Okay, and I think to Rob, to your point, I mean, we're the committee that deals with financial matters. This is definitely a financial matter. I don't know that it requires special declarations within our terms of reference or other areas, but I think it's money that's been received by the municipality, and it's just one other form of funds that have been received and may have specific uses in it going forward. So I think we can consider that in due course, but I don't think for the sake of this one-time situation that we need to provide an outline or specify requirements as it relates to the committee. That's just my thought on it right now. Is everybody else okay with that?
Yeah, I think our terms of reference are broad enough, several lines, several different sections in there that pick up that as a responsibility.
Right.
Yeah, we have big dollar signs by our committee name. So
It's financial matters.
Yeah, financial matters generally.
Or the other
there you go, right? Anyway, so if that's okay, we can move on, I think, from that point. And as I said, we're more than pleased to be able to assist management in any way possible when it relates to that. So before we go, the last point was election of chair.
No, Joyce had an item.
Oh,
she
Joyce had a
wanted-
point. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Joyce.
This is regarding the Land Opportunity Reserve Fund, and I'm thrilled to pieces that it was passed, but it was passed in this fiscal year, not last fiscal year. And the proceeds from the sale of the first piece of whatever you want to call them, surplus lands,
Community lands, yeah.
last year, are the proceeds from that sale going to be captured in this reserve fund? I mean, is that possible? Because I mean, our financials closed off December 31st. So I just really feel somehow if it isn't automatically captured, then a way of capturing it needs to happen. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So Joyce, in terms of our financials themselves and the transactions, we had created a Land Opportunity Fund in our books, and we flowed those funds through the Land Opportunity Fund. And the only difference is it wasn't a statutory reserve as of December 31st. But what we did, those funds flowed into the reserve and they flowed out of the reserve. Those funds were used, they were lent to fund the Cove Bay Water District. We will see them going through, and I will talk with our auditors in terms of whether we can include that fund in our list of statutory reserves, even though it wasn't legally a statutory reserve as of December 31st. It is now, and so would subsequent events lend themselves to allowing us to report it as a statutory reserve? I'll have to confer with the auditors on that.
I'm happy with this, but you have to be forewarned. I'm not going to let it go. I want to see it recorded as the money starts coming back in.
Yeah.
Well, the payment returns have to be worked out. I mean, as the bills go out. If the auditors won't accept it as a statutory reserve, I think it would merit a note because of the size of it.
Yeah.
Okay, Joyce. Thank you. I guess, okay, we're on to the last point then. And we should, I have to turn it over to somebody else to run the meeting for a minute. Hey, Raj, you're it.
Well, Steph
So
does it
we're
for all
gonna do
the other
a
committees, so
profit
she's used to
for
doing
votes
it.
And for 3 calls for nominations, please. So I'll step back.
I move that Fred be chair for the Finance Committee.
Second,
Third.
Okay.
You got a big
I'll let my
speech
name
there?
stand if that, in response, but I think you have to call 2 more times just because.
We do.
So Raj, you have to ask again,
or Steph can do it.
or Steph, I don't care.
Call Fred for chair.
Call a third time.
Seconded again.
The second
I
time?
just have to ask a second time, are there any further
Oh,
nominations? Are
is there
any
anybody
further
else who'd like to
nominations?
step forward for chair? Would anyone like to take on this responsibility? Joyce, John? Okay.
You have to
second.
ask the third time.
And just in
Is
case you changed your mind, is there anybody who would like to consider taking on the role of chair? Joyce? That was 3 times, Fred.
Okay, so I guess it's all closed now. And I'm prepared to let my name stand, so, okay. Here we go, all done.
Fred, you're doing such an excellent job that there's no competition.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
so
He,
much.
he doesn't, he doesn't want a technicality down the road to get him knocked out. That's what
Yeah.
he's doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we did it officially. So
Sorry
anyway, the
about
next
that,
point
Lori.
is to move on to a closed meeting.
I think
And,
we got a vice chair, Fred, is that also?
sorry, do we have a
got
vice chair?
I
Is
don't
it-
think we have a vice chair in our terms of reference.
We don't have one in our terms of reference, no.
All right.
We can address that when we do the terms of reference.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we move, as a recommendation, move to a closed committee meeting, I guess I should read it, eh? Okay.
Yeah.
The Finance Advisory Committee moved to a closed committee meeting immediately following the adjournment of the open Finance Advisory Committee to discuss items pursuant to section 91A of the community charter.
I'm just gonna grab a glass of water.
Okay, should have missed all this. 91 point, a part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter is considered or relates to or is one or more of the following: personal information about identifiable individual who also is being considered for position of his officer, employee, agent, or of the municipality or other position appointed by the municipality. And that actually is the resolution. So
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, so we now move to a closed meeting.
Okay, take a quick little breather while I stop the recording. And
Okay.
get a point.
We'll take a couple minutes here. You're saying?
Yeah, just a minute.
Okay. Yeah,
I could have waited to go get my glass of water.
it's all right.
Did we vote on going in closed?